I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Taylor, are you ready? Okay. Please stand.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Melissa, Dick, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so moved. Approval of the minutes. We have two different minutes, so we will take them. Let's take them one at a time, since there is a lot going on. So, approval to approve the minutes of the regular meeting on September 11th. Have a motion?
So moved.
Greg? Second. Melissa? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the special meeting on September 25th. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Dick? Second.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Any?
I'm opposed.
You're opposing the minutes?
Yep.
Is there anything that needs to be fixed?
No.
Okay.
And I'm abstaining.
Yeah, okay, Melissa's abstaining, thank you. Okay,
All right, so we have some presentations this evening. We have three presentations, and we're starting with our a trip to Greece that was taken. And Mr. DeStagio, who was one of the chaperones, is here to talk to you about this. And I think you have at least one student with you, right? To talk.
So, how you doing? I'm James DeStagio. I'm a business teacher and computer teacher here at high school, and I chaperone the Greece trip. This is Olivia Lopes. She was one of the students on the trip. So we were just talking about what do we want to talk about this trip. I mean, there's a lot of things we want to talk about. So what was our favorite part of the trip? So my favorite part, because there's so many, my favorite part was when we were on the cruise ship. We went on a cruise, anyway. So we went on a cruise for like a few nights. We were on the cruise ship, and I think it was Miss Erickson who asked all the kids, what was your favorite place, something you learned, and we probably did favorite food. So I'm just going to share that with you guys right now. So my favorite place was Samos. It's a place that people don't really even know really like exists in Greece, I think. It's like a lesser known island. So why is it my favorite? It was right next to Turkey. It was gorgeous. Not as many people go there. There's a lot of facts about it that were like kind of like crazy. Like I had no idea. Like the wine from the Vatican is from Samos. The only place where there's chameleons, I think, in Greece is Samos. And there was a lot of other things. It was really cool. So that was my favorite place. My favorite food.
it's too many.
I don't even know what I said that night, but it was probably the thing I was eating at the moment. And then something I learned was all those things about Samos. Okay, so there's a lot that we could share. I think that was probably like one of the best experiences that we had that night, at least for me. We were all on the cruise ship. We were all dressed up. I said this to her, I kind of felt like I was kind of like a dad at that moment, and we were like having a nice dinner and everything, talking about our trip, and that's really what mattered the most with this trip, just being together and seeing the experiences that all the kids had.
Personally, my favorite part was one of the kids on the trip. It was his first time on a plane and out of the country, so it was really cool to watch him as he experienced it, because I've traveled before, but him being able to do this through the school was really awesome. And just watching everyone grow and become closer. I went on the trip and I didn't really have a designated friend I was going with, and the other girl that I had roomed with, we became like sisters at the end of the trip, so it was really cool.
I think Miss Erickson provided a slideshow of some of our pictures. There we are right there, so. That's good. So there you go. We want to thank you guys for letting us go on that trip. It wouldn't be possible without you guys, and we certainly have a lot of memories from that trip that we're gonna keep forever. So, thanks.
Thank you.
It looked amazing.
It was great.
Do you have any questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
I get jealous every time.
Me too. I do too.
We get to watch all the videos
Yeah.
and all.
It is nice.
I get jealous. So we have two other presentations. Presentation from Mr. Holtz, who I didn't see. I think he's here. Oh, there he is. I've got this concrete block thing.
I was already told I only have 5 minutes from somebody that's pretty important, but I don't know if I'll stay in 5 minutes, but I'll try to keep it short.
Is that you?
That was me. Okay.
You could say, wasn't me. So.
I know who's important.
So Mr. Holt is doing the high school academic reports, and you should all have a copy of that. It's also on the website for anybody who's at home watching. It's right on our front page.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening. We'll jump ahead to the third slide here. So as we've done the last couple years, we'll cover a couple of the things such as SAT and AP. So we'll start off with the SAT scores from last year. Now this is our current senior class. Technically, they do it in their junior year. And so what you're looking at here is just how we did in the two different sections. So ERW is like the English. It's evidence-based reading and writing. And then the math. And so that's how we compare to where the state performed this past year. What's important to know, and I've said this before, is the benchmarks are different for the ERW and for the math. For the ERW, we're looking at students getting a 480 or higher. For the math, we're looking at students getting a 530 or higher. That's not a benchmark that we set or the state sets. That's something that the College Board is basically deemed as what they consider a benchmark. By hitting a 480 in the English class, basically what they're saying is that students that can hit that mark are more likely to get like a C or a C plus in a first-year college course of the same type of subject. So The math is bumped up to the 530 simply based on their research and data in terms of what students would need to do so they can perform well in a first-year math course in college. It's a little deceiving when you look at that. It looks like our math department is not working as hard as the English department. It's not the case at all. If you were to look at the same score, so if you were to look at that 480 mark, we have about 63-64% of our students hitting that in math. So our students are performing pretty equally in the two areas. It's just that that gap of benchmark by the College Board is very different. So the next slide we have here, we're up to 4 years of data with the new SAT. I'm starting to run out of room, so I don't know that we'll get 5 years in next year. Really, the story has kind of been the same over the last 4 years. I haven't really noticed any significant change in any one direction. You know, we dropped 1% in ERW and we went up 1% by math. I still haven't found anything that says what is like really statistically significant. I think when you're moving 3, 4, 5, even 5%, especially when you're talking about class sizes of 90 to 100, where one student's roughly 1%, there could be a big swing. The other piece of this that's important to know, and I started looking into this more this year, the College Board themselves state that the score that any student gets, so let's say they consider me as a 500 just for round numbers. On any given day, my score could be 30 to 40 points below that or 30 to 40 points above that. So you're talking like a 60 to 80 point swing on any given day based on my personal ability. How they figure that out, I don't know. So when we look at some of these scores and you're talking about a benchmark of 480 or 530, you could have a student hitting 10 points below that and being deemed kind of like what their ability is from the College Board, but they don't really get credit for hitting that benchmark piece. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in what the scores are in terms of like what the student ability is. We're certainly using as a measure and trying to drive our instruction to support our students with that, because at the end of the day, the scores are important for our students when they're going off to college. I still do enjoy having the SAT as our test as opposed to like the SBAC, just because the work that we're putting into it certainly benefits our students. It's not like some arbitrary test that no college will ever look at. So the last slide that we have on the SAT, I've always given you guys this, so you have been very supportive of our students. I think next week, October 16th, will be the 3rd or 4th year that the board has paid for PSAT 8-9 and PSAT 10-11. So we have our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders all taking the PSAT next Wednesday, free of charge to the students. We do that for 2 reasons. There's a lot of research that shows the more times that the students are able to take a test like that, just the better prepared they are from the experience. They also give us a ton of data through the College Board suite that we can then see in terms of how they're performing, what types of questions they're doing well or not doing well on. So what we're looking at here is our current seniors. So they were juniors last year. They took the PSAT in October, and then they took the SAT maybe in April last year. It always moves between March and April. And so you see that the mean score has jumped up on both, which it should. The test is scored a little bit on a different scale, the PSAT versus SAT. But the benchmarks are basically the same. We're not totally comparing apples to apples in the sense that if we missed a couple kids that were absent on the day of the PSAT, maybe we got a transfer student or so. So we could have a gap of like 7 or 8 students that didn't take both those tests. But generally speaking, they performed however they did in the fall, and it was pretty consistent with the spring. And their mean score jumped up a little over 20 points for each one, and that's kind of like the expected growth if you just look at how the College Board breaks up the different benchmarks from one test to the next. Do you want me to take questions on SAT now, or would you rather do questions all at the end?
Fine, if you want to.
Doesn't matter to me.
Fine.
I'll take questions on the SAT since that's on our mind.
Anybody? All right.
Can I put a shameless plug in real quick?
Yes.
So tomorrow evening, myself, Mr. Fatek, and Ms. Simpson, we are going to do a workshop for parents from 6:30 to 7:30 in the library. We're kind of calling it College for Less. It's a smorgasbord of things. But one of the things Ms. Simpson's going to work on is Khan Academy, which is a resource that parents can have their students utilize to help prepare for SAT and AP. But we're also going to talk a little bit about CLEP and CSS. And so if that's not familiar to you at all and you have students grades 9 through 12, please come tomorrow night. You'll find out a little bit more. 6:30 to 7:30. Shameless plug. All right, so then our AP. This is certainly a highlight this year for us. I'm very grateful for the support that we've had from the board. You guys have been encouraging us and allowing us to add continual AP courses. The goofy guy that was just up here doing the funny pose in the picture in Greece, he is teaching our AP computer science class, which is in its first year. So we're excited to add that to this list as we get to the scores next year. So you are looking at a 5-year review. The top one there, the number enrolled in AP courses, that's what I've always kind of said is like butts and seats. So if I have a student who is taking AP Calc and AP History and AP Language, that one student counts for 3 butts and seats, so that number is pretty high. When you look at the next row down, the total AP students, that's the unique number of students. So we had 120 out of about 407 or so from last year that were in an AP course. Then you have the number of exams, the number of AP students that had a 3 or higher. That's the score, so it's a 5-point score in total. The College Board still deems like a 3 or higher as passing. Not all colleges are still looking at it like that. A lot of colleges, including like Wisconsin Central, they're looking at 4s and 5s. But the 3 is still the score that the College Board uses, for whatever that's worth. So the really good things about last year, we had a ton more students in our AP program. We had a ton more of those students taking multiple AP courses. And we have had the highest performance that we've had, I think, since I've been here, and I think even going further back when we only had 3 or 4 AP courses. So our students and the teachers that were working with them last year certainly put a lot of effort forth, and it shows by having 63% or so of our students hitting at least that 3 or higher on a test. Currently this year, you can see a little bit lower. We have 178 students. 105 are unique for this year. And so about a third of our students here are in an AP course again this year. That percent is pretty close to last year. I think last year when I presented, we were like 32%. So the program is strong and the students are doing well with it. Questions on AP before we go further?
So is that because there was like scheduling issues too? I know some of the kids decided to opt out of certain AP courses. So do you think that's one of the reasons why it wasn't as high this year, or is it this total?
So our enrollment is down by about 30-ish or so students in total. We've also, I think you start having some students that have taken quite a few AP classes and they may kind of dwindle off a little come senior year, or they're only taking one. You know, when we were only offering 4 or 5, the students were really trying to cram it all in. We now offer AP Gov, which is primarily a sophomore class. We have about 3 that you could do junior year and another 4 so that are more senior year, and some of those are interchangeable. The other thing that we've done, I don't see that the unique number is drastically lower. I think the number of students in an AP course total is a little lower. And some of that is, between myself and the counselors, we've tried to push back on some of these students that are taking 3 and 4 AP classes in 1 year. It is just a really lot of stuff to put on one plate. I don't know that it's healthy for a lot of students to have that type of pressure with all the other stuff that goes on with high school and college applications and jobs and sports. I realistically think 2, maybe 3 is where some students should be at. So some of that is us trying to curb back a little too of what we are seeing students are able to handle or not be able to handle.
And I would add on to that as we added new AP courses over the past few years, like when we brought on board AP Gov, we had seniors going back and enrolling because they didn't want to miss that opportunity. And the same thing with like the AP Comp and the AP Lit and the AP Lang. We had children and students who were already past the point of taking it who went back and tried to double up in order to take advantage of the opportunity. And I think we're beyond that now, where students have had those opportunities to plan from sophomore year on up, which is why you would have seen them double and triple enrolling in courses.
To some extent, we've become our own enemy too, where now that we have 9 AP courses in 7 periods, a couple of years ago, we never had an issue with 2 APs falling in the same period. And we do try to keep some of them, like an AP Calc and an AP Lit, which are more senior classes, like separated. But at the end of the day, as we add that to the program, there's just limited time, and there's going to be some times where students have to pick one or the other.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for this part? All right.
All right, moving on. So the class of 2019, who is on their way out or has left, we can look at where they were headed after graduation in June compared to some of the last handful of graduating classes. We continue to hover somewhere around that 70 to 80% mark of students going to a 4-year, 2-year, or technical school. We had more than ever this year going right into the workforce. We've had a pretty strong showing of 2 to 3 students that typically go into the service right out of high school. I will say that I continually hear from people that have graduated like a year or 2 before that then also go into the service. So they kind of go off, they try and do some things on their own, and then they still end up going to the service. So it doesn't really surprise me when you look at this town and how service-oriented all of our students are. So some of the students realize that right away when they graduate, that's what they want to do, and others kind of try and do something else and then decide to go that route. All right, and so just before I wrap up, a couple of the focal points for this year for the high school. You guys have heard a little bit, I believe, about the instructional framework. I think that was presented. That's pretty much in line with some of the leverage points that we were looking at last year at the high school. And so we've been putting a lot of our effort in our common planning time. So once a week I'm meeting with the departments and we're talking about how to develop a lesson based on that instructional framework and looking at our learning targets. All of our PD and faculty meetings are geared towards the same development of that knowledge. Last year we were able to do 2 internal instructional rounds. So I think you guys hear quite a bit about some of the district-wide ones where we'll go to Fisher and we'll bring a whole crew and we'd spend a whole day doing a very formal process. Last year we were able to get about 20 of our teachers into other teachers' classrooms between the December and the March date. Last year they were really just going in to look at instruction in general. We just wanted to open the doors and have teachers see teachers teach. And then they were able to discuss afterwards a little bit about some of the things they saw and things that they wanted to put into their classroom. This year we're going to formalize it a little bit more. With all the work that we're doing on the instructional framework, when they go into the classes, they're going to be looking a little bit more specifically for some of those components and then following up with conversation around that. CER is claim evidence reasoning. Really what that skill is argument from evidence. We're trying to use the same model in our 4 departments, math, science, social studies, and English. So we're still working on trying to fine-tune some of that, but we're trying to have that one skill kind of embedded through all of our courses. The SEL stuff I know you guys have heard a ton about. I had quite a chuckle yesterday afternoon when I had a chance to meet with 3 lovely students. I won't mention any of them. And we ended up we had like an hour-long conversation about all sorts of stuff. But they brought up mood meter, and they were like, I kind of thought it was hokey when we first started doing it, but now like they use it all the time. And I think they still kind of use it a little lighthearted and be like, oh, I'm kind of in the red today, and or, I'm in the blue today, and it's kind of the way actually I still use it. So there's times where I'll go to Mr. Vigliotti's office. I'm like, I am in the red. I know I'm in the red, and I shouldn't go handle this situation right now. And some of it is kind of saying it jokingly, but at the same point, it is that recognition of like where my emotion is, and how could that possibly impact my next steps and whatever it is I may face. So I got a real chuckle and a lot of joy listening to them talk about how they're using the mood meter for themselves. So that's good. The last thing that I want to talk about, and we're starting to finally wrap up on this process. I know I've talked about this for the last couple years. We are just a couple weeks away from our NEASC accreditation visit. It starts on October 20th, which is a Sunday. I have sent an invite through, I know, Chairman Ms. Johnson and through Dr. Semmel. We are looking for any board members that would like to participate on Sunday. We start with kind of like a panel presentation that's around 1 o'clock in the auditorium. That's open to pretty much anybody that would want to attend. Then there's a series of interviews with some of the teachers. And then from 3 o'clock to 3:45, there's an opportunity for board members to meet with about half of the visiting committee that comes in. So they'll have certain questions for board members in general. They'll just kind of ask about the school and the community. I think we have 3 or 4 that I've heard confirmation from, but if you're interested, please either contact myself or Ms. Johnson, and then we can get you all set up with that. So just as a recap about that visit, we will have 12 members that are either current or retired educators in the field. Most are from Connecticut. They could be from Massachusetts as well, though. They will spend Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with us. They'll be in and out of our building, in our classes. They'll be meeting with parents and board members, teachers, administrators, counselors, students. They end up working pretty much from like 6 in the morning till about 11 o'clock at night. By Sunday evening, they'll have a pretty good idea of what they're stepping into for Monday already. It's just that in-depth of a process. And then by Wednesday, they have a written product basically done. They kind of share a couple highlights with us. They move on, and then we're expecting a report somewhere in about 4 to 6 weeks in terms of a draft. I will see it, and so will our co-chairs that have facilitated much of this work. They'll ask if there's any issues or clarifying problems that we may want to talk about, and then it goes to the actual NES Commission. That's a little bit more formal, and so I'm expecting by the end of this year we should have a very formal report that would then be shared and could go public with the board. So we're getting close to wrapping up. There will be some other work after they go, but next week's a little bit of the crazy week, just finalizing the hotel and the room and getting all the pieces together. But I have to give a lot of credit to our staff as a whole, but certainly Mr. Schumann and Mr. Nave. They have co-chaired this exercise for the last 2 years and have done a tremendous amount of work. So I do want to thank them. And again, if anybody would like to come from 3 to 3:45, please let me know.
So just so the board knows that myself, Karen, Cindy, and Dick will be representing the board, but if anybody else wants to join us, just let me know.
Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave the clicker on for you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Holtz. And we also do the Smarter Balanced assessment results on the same night, so we've asked Ms. Parsons to come on up and go through these results with you. Again, this presentation is also online on our website, so anybody who's at home watching can go to the front page of our website and be able to take a look at this, so you can follow along at home. Ms. Parsons.
Great. Good evening. I'm going to start with a little bit of background information on Smarter Balance, but I'll go through it a little bit more quickly as we're getting more and more used to the Smarter Balance test. I think we have a greater background knowledge in terms of what the test is. But all of the slides, like Dr. Sundell said, will be available online. So when we look at the purpose of the state summative assessment, we are required, it's a federal and state law, that all students in grades 3 through 8 be annually assessed. So what the state of Connecticut has chosen as that assessment for grades 3 through 8 is the Smarter Balanced assessment suite. And what they've chosen for grade 11, as Mr. Holtz said, is the SAT. So what we're looking at is a matter of equity, because we're looking at giving the same test across all districts in Connecticut. So we're trying to measure public education across the state in a similar way. So what the purposes are is that we look for student achievement and growth. It's part of a larger accountability system, because when we talk about Smarter Balanced, we then talk about what were the achievement scores, what were the growth scores, and then I'll come back to you in a few months and we'll talk about the accountability index. So how do those scores figure into the accountability index that scores our district as a whole? This measure is proven to be valid, reliable, and fair, but we do caution at all times that it's just an annual snapshot of student learning. So it is how each student in the district performs in a given period of time, whether it's a day or 3 days or a week. It's how they perform on one assessment on that one administration. So what we make sure that we talk about is that we triangulate data. So in addition to looking at this data, which should be reflective of all of our instruction over the course of the year, we don't teach to this because we know it's just one example and one snapshot. And we also say that we want to have a wide variety of work samples. So other things you might consider would be classroom assessments, teacher observation, universal screenings, and then frequent progress monitoring and diagnostic assessments as needed. So it's just one piece. So the summative assessment, the Smarter Balanced assessments, are aligned to the Connecticut Common Core standards for English Language Arts and Mathematics. It's administered in the last 12 weeks of school to students in grades 3 through 8, which usually looks like right after April vacation through the beginning of May, usually is the main window for administration. And it's adaptive. So when I go on, if I was sitting next to Miss Ehrenheim and we were both taking the test online, she would have different problems than I would, because the test sort of assesses where to start, and then if we're doing well with the items, it will give me harder items, or it will drop me back and give me easier items to try to narrow in on my exact level of performance. So it would be doing the same thing for my peer sitting right next to me. So the items, we also get frequent updates from the state where they're asking for people to come in and review items or give feedback on items. So it is an ever-evolving process that it is undertaken by a consortium of states. So what you see is that computer adaptive testing is used in both English Language Arts and in math. And so that is usually shorter answer or a click and drag. It could be multiple choice. It could be fill in the blank. But there's a more extensive piece on math as well called a performance task. So what it will do, it will present problems in context. And it's a task where it might be, one example would be that you're designing a room and you need to apply the concepts of area and perimeter and geometric shapes and angles. So it will take you through, like, what would you choose, and then how much space would be left, and it will take you through an entire series of questions, and we call that a performance task. And on that performance task, students carry their knowledge through a progression of questions, and so credit is given based on their work throughout the entire performance task. So when we see the scores that come into us, and the scores usually come into us at a district level right as school is dismissing. So usually at the end of June, we are getting the results. And then in the fall, we have parent reports that come to us from the state, and we send those out to parents. So parents have already received their score reports. So the scores, what you get, the raw score is called the scale score. And if you think of a ruler or a tape measure, these scores are a continuous vertical scale that starts at 2,000 and ends at 3,000. So if you're tracking your student or watching your child year over year, you would expect continuous growth on that measure. So you would expect the scores to climb year over year. What we then do is we take those scale scores and we break them into achievement levels. So just like Mr. Holtz was talking about what was considered proficient or mastery on the Smarter Balance based on cut scores, we do the same thing with Smarter Balanced. So we take those scale scores and we say, okay, at a 2641, that is a level 2. Anything above that is a level 2. And what we're looking for on the 4 levels is proficiency is considered level 3 or 4. So when we look at numbers further on in the presentation, and I talk about the percentage of students who are proficient at something, it's adding together the numbers that are in that level 3, which meets, and level 4, which exceeds. Additionally, breaking it down into each subject area, what parents see on the parent report when it comes home and what educators see is a little bit of a breakdown. So we know that the test is assessing English Language Arts. So within English Language Arts, we can break it into reading, listening, and writing and research. And you see next to that that a check mark would show that the student's performance was well above standard. An equal sign means that it was at or near, or sometimes you will see a symbol that indicates that the child is definitely struggling in this area. Teachers in the classroom are using interim assessments that are based on Smarter Balanced, and this is the same kind of data that they get back when students do those interim assessments in the classroom, and it helps drive our instruction. So when we look at the data, we talk about it in different ways. We talk about achievement change. We talk about how students are doing in grade 3 over time. But the innate part of that is that those are different students each year. So it can help us determine how our grade 3 curriculum is being laid out, and actually our K-3 curriculum or pre-K-3 curriculum is building up learners and how students do with a similar assessment year over year. But we have to remember that the students are different when we look at it that way. When we want to look at the same group of students, we look at what's called a cohort. So we look at a grade level of students, a group of students as they move forward, and we look to see that they're continually growing on that scale, and we can track them better as a group. The best way to look at it is what's called a matched cohort. So in that cohort, we would only track the kids who have been here year over year for administration. So that's a lot of the background information. Now what I'm going to get into is the actual data from last year. And I know these slides are very small to see on the screen, but you have full slide copies in front of you and they can be viewed online. So the first way that we look at the data, we tend to drill down into it. So we start at a high level. And what we do is we look at how we do compared to the state, similar to what we did with the SAT. And what you'll see is that this year we scored 60.8% of students in ELA were at that proficient level, met or exceeding, and that's 5.1 percentile points higher than the state average. And in math, we were 5.6 percentile points higher than the state average at 53.7% of students meeting or exceeding the benchmark. Once we look at the district as a whole, we then drill down into the school level. And what you'll see at the school level this year is we had a really great growth year in terms of the middle school. You'll see that the middle school from 17-18 to 18-19 increased 21 percentile points in ELA and 11 points in math. So there's a lot of celebration to be had there, and we're really looking critically at our practices last year and trying to perpetuate those practices over time. What we see at Fisher is that the scores did drop slightly, and that's reflective of the increased student need that we're seeing within the building. And what we're seeing at Plymouth Center is a maintenance or a slow growth over time, with the exception of math dipping a little bit in this past year. Once we look at that achievement, we can then also look at growth. So the way that the state tracks growth is twofold. They talk about the growth rate and the percentage of target achieved. So if you think about the percentage of target achieved, I like to think of it as one of those fundraising like temperature bulbs that comes up and it says like, here's your target, you want to hit $1,000. But what if we only raised $750? We would be 75% to our goal. So what the state does is based on where students perform, they set an individual target for each child. And what that number under the average percentage of target achieved is showing us is how far the students got on that fundraising meter. So if their goal was 1,000 points, or more likely 100 points, and they gained 75, then they would be 75% to the target. So what you see there is that, again, we are higher than the state average in that in ELA, on average, our students were 69.1% of the goal that was set for them at the state level. And in math, they were 66.4% to that goal this year, which was an increase over last year, and it's a significant increase over the state average. And ELA, in fact, is almost 10 percentile points higher than the state average. The other side of the chart, what you're seeing is the growth rate. So when you have that fundraising gauge and your funders come to you and say, were you fully funded? You're either going to say yes or no, right? So what we do with the growth rate is we look at each student, we go down the list and say, did you hit your target, yes or no? And you only get credit if they've hit it at 100%. So it makes sense that these rates are a little bit lower than the target achieved. So what you see is in the state of Connecticut, in ELA, 39.9% of students across the state hit that goal. And in Plymouth, 48.6% of our students in ELA hit that goal, which again is higher than the state average, and math is also higher than the state average. Again, what we'll do is we'll drill down into schools, and we see similar patterns with the increased performance at the middle school you'll see that their percent of the goal achieved is upwards of 70% in both ELA and math, and over 50% of the students in each area hit their growth rate. That's the yes, they hit it, or no, they did not. And what you see is that while scores did not increase significantly at Fisher, the growth rates are not too different from what they have been in the past, with the exception of math, and we're really delving into that to see what's going on. And you'll see at Plymouth Center that their percent to target achieved and their growth rate has dropped, and that's one of the things that we look at is how do you maintain a very high level of performance over time. Because if you remember, at Plymouth Center, they usually have about 70% of students hitting that meets or exceeds. So how do we keep students growing when they're already meeting or exceeding? So what the growth rate is doing is that it's really holding us accountable so that every student is growing no matter where they're starting. Excuse me. So one of the things we like to remind ourselves of at this point is where we fall in terms of spending, and this is a slide that this group has seen many times. We fall 15th out of our DIRG, out of the 17 school districts that we can compare ourselves to in our demographic reference group. We fall 15th in spending, 15th lowest in spending. And you see the state average falls up there in between the 6th and the 7th ranking districts. So what I showed you previously was how we were doing at that, looking at performance over time. When we get into the cohort piece of it, this is where we look at the, what I call like the staircase chart. And you have this actually in color as well if you wanted to look at it more extensively, like, and see it the way that it is on the screen. But what you can do is you can follow a color. Like if I'm looking on the left-hand side of that, following that light blue color from the third graders that started with us in 14-15, I can follow them down. How did they do in 4th grade, and in 5th grade, and in 6th grade, and in 7th grade? And next year we'll be able to look at how they did in 8th grade and follow them all the way through their progression. And on the right-hand side is their raw score, that scale score. So some of the things of note here is that overall with the district this year with ELA, we're up 8.8 percentile points. So last year we had 52% of students at the meets or exceeds. This year we're upwards of 60%. Additionally, what you'll see is some of that growth at the middle school. If we were following that blue bar, we would have seen that last year from 5th to 6th grade, that group dropped in their performance, and now they're back up to a very similar level of performance. And that's something we've seen over time is that transition from 5th to 6th grade. And we spent a lot of time looking at that last year. And we really tried to improve some of our practices and align the transition from elementary to middle school. And we're seeing that hopefully that's one of the reasons why this is, we saw the increase in scores, and those changes are paying off for us. You'll also see great gains with the group from 4th to 5th grade and from 6th to 7th and 7th to 8th. One of the things we want to watch is how our students do when they come into us in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And what we're seeing this year is that our 3rd and 4th graders are coming in a little bit weaker than they have in the past. So we're really going to hone in on what's going on with each individual student at those levels and try to get them back up to where we were previously with performance levels. In math, that's the same layout here. And a lot of what you'll see is similar. We continue to grow overall in math this year. Although it was only 0.1 of a percentile point, we are continuing to maintain or increase our performance overall. And you'll see great maintenance at the middle school level this year from 7th to 8th. And you'll also see a great increase from 6th to 7th. We're seeing a similar dip a little bit in that 3rd grade coming in over time, and we're looking at what that means. Does that mean we have increased need coming in from kindergarten on up, or does that mean that we need to change some of our practices around that? So on the previous slide, when we saw the graph of the spending, these are the same districts. So what you see here now are columns going 5 years back, how we have fallen in our DERG. So they're ranked from the top is the highest performing in our DERG, down to the bottom is the lowest performing. One of the things I did differently this year in preparing for the presentation is that if you look carefully, you'll see some of the schools and districts are listed in green. Those are all schools who increased their baseline. So like we're listed in green because we increased our proficiency levels overall. We went from 52% to 60.8, so we're listed in green. So what that means as you look here is that many districts are increasing. Some are not. But we are not only increasing ourselves, our proficiency levels, but we're leapfrogging over districts who are also increasing their own performance levels. So you can see that we came up and over districts like Stafford and Griswold and Seymour, who also increased their raw scores, and we increased ours, but also outperformed them. So we jumped from 12th in our DERG up to 7th in the DERG. And what you see in math is that we regained the position we had 2 years ago when we went up from 6th last year to 7th in the DERG. And of the schools that are above us and outperforming us, they also increased, and we again jumped over schools that were also growing. Not only do we look at our DERG, but if you remember a few years back, Dr. Semmel had shared that if we were to redo some of the demographic reference groups right now, they would be a little bit different from the original assignments when we looked at them, when the state came out with them many years ago. So what we do is we also look at districts that just surround us geographically, because when people are coming into a community in an area and looking for a home, what they can do is they can go onto EdSite Secure and pull up scores in the surrounding areas and sort of use that information as they decide where to live. So what you see when we compare ourselves to some of the towns that are right around us demographically is that, again, we grew in our in that group. We went up to being 4th in the group in terms of ELA. But what you'll notice if you look to the column all the way to the right is that C and D mean that these towns are in a higher demographic reference group than we are. So we are in the level F. I don't like the letter, but it's an F. We're in the F DERG group, and so we are outperforming districts that are in higher DERGs, like a Thomaston, who's in the DERG E. And for math, you see that we're right up there as 3rd in the surrounding towns, and we're outperforming districts that are Ds and Es. And again, it's color-coded, and you're seeing that not only are we jumping up over towns, but we're jumping up over towns that are growing. What we also like to do is look at magnet school performance in comparison. We look at the magnet schools where, if we have students magneting out, where they most typically are going. And you can see when we break down the elementary schools, Plymouth Center is significantly outperforming the 2 magnet schools that draw the majority of our elementary kids towards them. And Fisher, unfortunately, this year did not perform at the same level, but we're continuing to look at that and why that is and what we can do. When we look at the middle school is also significantly outperforming the magnet school that draws the most of our middle school students. So now that I've presented lots of numbers, we'll get back to words and comments. So what does all of this mean? I've shared a lot with you as we went through the slides. But what you can see is that we are significantly higher than the state average in both ELA and in math, but we are well below the average per pupil costs and expenditure in the state. And while we rank 7th in ELA and 5th in math in our DERG, we rank 15th out of 17th in spending in that DERG. So what this is showing us, it's not an excuse, but what it's saying is that we spend less money than other districts, and we are outperforming a good number of those districts. So we're being really efficient with our staff and our spending, and we're trying to absolutely do the best that we can by every single child in this district, and it's showing in our scores. Again, we see that Eli Terry's scores really increased this year, and they're significantly outperforming one of the magnet schools that we traditionally lose students to, and we've seen that Plymouth Center is continuing to make that incremental growth in ELA. So what does this mean? We don't just look at the data and say, this is what we see. We actually take that data back and we use it to inform a lot of decisions at the district level and at the school level. So what are we doing? We're really looking this year, we're implementing a curriculum review cycle, and the math curriculum is the first up, partially because our resources are going to expire first in that area, but it was supported as well by our scores on Smarter Balance this year, is that we really need to consider what's happening with our math curriculum, and we're going to use the scores as part of the review when we move forward that way. We're also continuing to refine that Reader's Workshop model, and we think that that might also be one of the things we can attribute the success of the middle school to, is really highly implementing that model through 6th and 7th grade last year and moving it to 8th grade this year. So we're continuing to refine our practices there. When you implement something new, it usually takes about 5 years to really do it well, and I believe we're in year 4 of true implementation district-wide now, K-8 for a workshop. And so what we're doing is we're honing our craft. We're getting better at pulling small groups and individual students and matching needs and books to each individual reader. One of the things that Mr. Holtz and Dr. Simmel have also mentioned is the instructional framework. What we're looking at is really, what does a good lesson look like? What should every lesson contain? And we're rolling that out to our staff, and we're trying to perpetuate best practice across the district. And we're also, for our students who aren't achieving at the level of proficiency, we're looking at our SRBI plan, which is Scientifically Research-Based Interventions. It's called RTI in the rest of the country. And so we're looking at that plan and looking at the plan that we have and making sure we have a fidelity of implementation around that, but also revising and refining forms and processes as we need to. So I just talked for a long time. Are there any questions?
I just have kudos to the staff. They did a really good job. The teachers here, as you can see, we don't spend a lot of money, and whatever assets that they have in the classroom, looks like they're doing a really great job. With the amount of money that we're spending. So kudos to the staff. Let them know that congratulations. I just have some concerns about Harry and Fisher. If you look at and I'm not gonna compare schools, but they're pretty far down the pole as far as ELA and math. And I think we need to start looking at some resources that need to get in there to at least bring them up. I wouldn't expect them to go from 49 to 75, but next year, even if they went up, 5 percentage points, at least you are working your way up the pole.
And one of the things I should point out, and thank you, Jerry, for reminding me, is that when we look at that matched cohort over time, even if a group goes from 43% proficiency in one year to 43% proficiency in the next year, that does indicate growth. It doesn't indicate that we're closing the gap towards more students being proficient, but what it does mean is that all of those students made a full year's worth of growth. So maintaining proficiency levels does mean that students are growing. It's just not they're not accelerating more than a year's worth of growth unless that number is increasing.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, so the next thing is the superintendent's update. I wanted to mention again, thanks to Mr. DeStagio and Mr. Holtz and Ms. Parsons for the presentations tonight. I also wanted to mention, and some of you might be thinking about mentioning this as well, so I won't take too much of this, but we did have a great suicide prevention walk. I assume one of the students will mention that, so I won't say much more about that.
Thank you. Don't steal it now.
I won't steal all the thunder, but I do want to say thank you to Bob Nave and Kim Jabagi for the hard work that they did to organize that walk. And then I'm also going to quickly turn it over to Ms. Parsons. She is just going to give a quick you heard about the NIASC update. She's going to give the NIAC update.
So one of the obligations of the Smart Start grant when we applied now 4 years ago was that by the end of our third year of operations, we would obtain NAEYC or NIAC accreditation. And what that means is there's a series of 10 standards that are broken down into maybe 50 to 100 statements at the program level and then at the classroom level. And we will have a visitor coming in the next 4 months, and they'll be looking at all of those statements and the evidence we've compiled. And we have to meet their standards, which are meeting at least 70 to 80% of those hundreds of statements. And if we meet that based on their visit, based on the documentation we've submitted and what they observe in their visit, then we will have our accreditation by the end of the school year. So that's very exciting. The preschool staff has worked extremely hard. So we have Miss Onofrio, Miss Russo, and Mrs. Trudeau over at Plymouth Center, and they're working collaboratively together to do their classroom portfolio side of it. And Miss Turner and Miss Ehrenheim and all of our central office staff are working together to do the program portfolio.
That's the update.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, moving on. Ms. Taylor.
All right, I'm going to talk about the suicide prevention walk really quick. It was incredible. I didn't go last year, so I can't really say, but Nave was talking a lot about how much more successful it was. There was over 80 people walking with us, and over 20 of them were waiting, over 20 people were waiting at the green when we got all the way there. The drum line was amazing that led us all the way through the little walk, I don't know. And it was a really good event. They had a DJ there, there was a couple of speakers, and then they opened the floor. I was one of the people that spoke at the walk. And it was a really great event. It was a fantastic way to show how suicide can touch everybody, that it affects everyone. And on top of that, it also opened the floor to talking about kindness, which is something that I'm going to be doing within student council. We're going to be really pushing kindness and really pushing open-mindedness and all of this stuff because of the walk. Nave did a fantastic job in pushing everyone to go and creating a fantastic atmosphere for everyone. And then, to completely switch it, on October 25th, the staff infection group is going to be playing they played before winter break last year. They're really, really good. It's hilarious. It's like they're a really good group, and they make the students laugh. It was like one of the best events we had last year to see them all play and like sing and have a good time. And then there was, for the band and color guard, there was the Mum Parade performance, and the marching band came in third. They were placed. There's a Berkshire League Music Festival this Friday for chorus and band. And it's the top high school band and chorus students. There's like 5 of them performing for my chorus class, and I don't know how many people are performing for band. There was the band field trip to the Big E that also included color guard, and it was just for fun after the Mum Parade to celebrate that performance that they all worked really hard on. I heard that people had a ton of fun there. The potatoes are always fantastic. That's what I like there. And then there is the Frenzied Fairy Tales Fall Show for the Drama Club, and it will be opening in less than a month. Tickets can be purchased from any Drama Club member or at booktickets.com. Their shows are they always put so much work into them, so I'd recommend going. It's always pretty fun. But yeah, that's all I got for you.
Thank you. Julie, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
I'm Julia Zanuski. I wasn't able to make it to the last meeting, but I am the Vice President of Student Council. So recently, our guidance counselors have been working with all of the senior students on filling out their Common App, where they answer questions about their personal lives so that their college application process will be smoother than if they didn't and would have been set free to do it by themselves. A part of the Common App requires students to choose colleges that they want to apply to, which can be very challenging to decide upon considering that there's hundreds of thousands of colleges. To help, our school has scheduled visits with representatives from various colleges. We have already been visited by UConn and Eastern, and we'll be seeing someone from Western very soon. In addition to this, our school has a financial aid night coming up. It's on October 24th at 6 p.m. And a representative from the ECMC Foundation will be present, and they will talk about FAFSA. They're a non-profit organization, and they will enforce grants that people can apply for instead of loans. And this is both student and parent driven.
I have some sports news. So the boys cross country team completed their undefeated season by beating Thomaston and Chapag at Chapag High School. Terryville had 5 runners in the top 10 spots, led by Krista Forrest in first, CJ Hart in second, Connor Garrity in third, Nick Fusco in fifth, and Nick Sapone in seventh. The girls soccer team beat Thomaston this past week 3-0. Their next game is tomorrow, October 10th at 3:45 at home against Donawag. The volleyball team has had a great season so far. Their next game is Tuesday, October 15th at 4 p.m. at Canton High School. And the boys soccer team has also had a great season so far. And their next game is tomorrow, October 10th at 3:45 at Donawag High School.
Any questions for the students?
Just one clarification. You had mentioned the staph infection group playing.
Yeah.
I thought you said October 25th, but you
Is
also
it-
mentioned Christmas time, so I want to make sure you clarify.
It was mentioning, so they have a show October 25th at the school, I don't know when.
They do? Okay.
I think. That's what Hope
should
said
do it.
yesterday, right? Yeah, but I was mentioning the fact that they had played before winter break.
That's where I got confused.
No,
it's okay.
I didn't write it correctly, so it was really scrambling in my brain.
I'm good now. Now I understand
I'm glad
how they
I
were
cleared it up for
connected.
you. I'm glad
Thank you, Taylor.
I'm glad you're in the yellow.
I am in the yellow.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a public comment. We're only going to have one public comment because just the way the agenda. So, any public comment? Nobody else is there, right? Okay. All right, moving on. So we didn't have either committees because one wasn't actually scheduled and the other, there was no quorum, so there's no business to take care of. So we'll move on to board liaison reports. So I will go first. Harry S. Fisher was way back on September 17th. They spoke a lot about the memberships that they attended, the PTA Leadership Conference, the Connecticut PTA Leader Conference. They talked about how successful their open house was, and they already had passed their membership goal from last year, already before the open house even started. They spoke about their upcoming fundraisers, book fair, their enrichment programs. They were extremely excited about their partnership with Plymouth Center PTA and their trunk and treat, say that 3 times fast. That again is here on October 25th. I believe it starts at 5 for setup. And there is going to be a fire truck, I do know that. They'll also be having a reusable bag fundraiser year round, right? Am I right about that? I think so. And it has the school logo, so it's good because everybody needs their bags now. But it's going to be year round. They're not just stopping it. So whenever anybody needs anything, just go to Fisher and you'll get a nice bag. And then their next meeting is October 22nd, which I believe is the same night as Eli. Am I correct? Yeah. So there's an overlap for like October meeting, I think.
There's 5.
There's 5 overlaps.
There's 5 Tuesdays.
Okay.
In the month.
So I just wanted to verify that there's going to be some overlapping in some of the meetings, but okay. Josiah, would you like to do Plymouth Center, please?
So for their fall fundraiser with Cherrydale Farms, just recently ended. They said it seemed to go very well, but they're still waiting to get the final numbers in. For their upcoming stuff, they have an October family feast at Jake's Wayback Burgers, Thursday the 17th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And they have their fall scholastic book fair coming up October 21st to October 25th. And they're going to have their trunk or treat on October 25th. They also brought up a very interesting discussion about why there was not going to be school on election day, even though it wasn't in the high school. And the answer was, well, we voted on it, and that's just how it was. And then the town decided to put it not in the high school. But do you have any type of input on that? Would it be something to consider in the future if future elections aren't at the high school to change whether or not there's school on election day?
We always bring the calendars to you guys. I think always an option if the board wants us to look at that. And as long as it's okay, it's one of those things that I have not seen schools have school on election day. But as long as it's okay to do and the board wants us to do it, we could certainly look at that. But obviously we want people to have the chance to go out and do their civic duty of voting. We often choose it as a professional development day. So we need a professional development day anyways around that time, so it works out well for us. But we open for conversation.
But the other part of that conversation was the Veterans Day, though. There
I
was-
actually couldn't hear what they were saying.
Okay,
That's why
so
I
I'll
didn't
go,
mention
because
that.
I happened to be at this meeting. So they also had the conversation about Veterans Day, and a lot of the parents actually didn't like that we had Veterans Day, we had school, because they were saying some of the veterans had to go to too many schools. So I think it's a matter of, your perspective. So one of the parents felt very strongly about, well, if we're closed on Election Day, why are we not closed on Veterans Day? And they didn't understand the balance for us. But we did explain that, our calendar was out so much earlier, and then the town decided to change where the location of. So it wasn't like we all of a sudden could change, and the year had already started. So I think that's something we need to maybe make sure that the election people need to let us know ahead of time if we can change it prior to school year.
Right, and I think the election locations could change again, because I
I think
believe
so.
since it's more of an off-season kind of election, not a presidential election, they felt one location was enough. So my guess is, as we get to another presidential election, they will probably go back to 2 locations. I just don't know what those 2 locations would be. It might not be here, it might be Lyceum, it could be back to Fisher, it could be combinations. So we don't decide on that. It's the registrars who make that decision. They work with us if they want to use a school. We try to make sure that we can accommodate the elections. So it is very much future planning type work.
I mean, I think we did explain to them about the Veterans Day thing, that we wanted the kids to experience it, and there was talk about it last year that we wanted to have the celebrations in our schools. That's why we opened them. But it's interesting. You're not going to make everybody happy,
Right.
but it's just an interesting conversation that they brought up. So it's just something to think about when we're doing calendars again. So, thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Thank you. Miss Cindy, can you do Eli?
So last night we had our skate night. It was a really, really fun night. I really enjoy doing any townwide event. I know PTSA does the basketball event, but anytime the town gets together for the trunk or treats, when the Lions are doing their fall event, it's always a great turnout. So we had 156 skaters. Mrs. Suffridge was there. She's a really good skater. She did ice hockey for a while, so she is very good on skates. So that was very well attended. We brought up the community book at the PTA meeting, and we're going to be adding the $500 to bring up for approval for the next meeting. The PTA meeting was well attended by a lot of 6th grade parents, so that was very nice to see a lot of new parents very engaged. We are looking for businesses to sponsor the back of our t-shirts again this year to give away for free at basketball games. And our next PTA meeting is October 22nd at 7 p.m. And then for Booster Club, so when we had our meeting on Monday, we had received a check and we weren't sure where the check came from. So Mrs. Boylan, who is the teacher at Plymouth Center, her father had just passed away. So she shared this really nice, we thanked her for putting the Booster Club as an in memory for her father, and she said some of her dad's proudest moments were when he played basketball at Terryville High School and they won the state champions. He never got tired of telling that story, and the way the whole town was there to celebrate, it was a no-brainer to choose the Booster Club in memory of her dad. So, and we just received 2 more checks today. I just checked the mailbox. So that's like a really nice thing, and it just really reflects that, he was 83 or 85 when he passed away, and his greatest memories were in high school. So everything that we do at school level, like, it's going to follow everybody for like years to come and stuff. So when I did the skate night last night, and then on Monday when I had read that article, it was like that's what really like makes me appreciate, you know, being on the PTA and making these great family events and functions. So that was really nice. We did a really impromptu fundraiser at the Snow White car wash in Bristol, and we had $700 raised just from pail shaking, and we're still waiting for the check for the cars that went through, and there was about 100 cars that went through. So that was a really good, easy fundraiser. Don't anyone steal our idea. We do plan on doing that a couple more times in the spring. The bench cushions just came in for the high school. It's going to be a really good fundraiser. Our bleachers aren't that comfortable, so stop by and pick up your, it has the kangaroo on it. It says Terryville High School on it, and they're really cute seat cushions for when you're in Board of Ed meetings, when you're watching the basketball games or anywhere else. So the Booster Club will be selling those. We're also starting our December calendar. We're looking for donations of items between $25 and $50, so gift certificates to Dunkin' Donuts, pizza restaurants, Christmas tree farms, and they'll be going on sale from November 4th to the 25th for the raffle tickets, and then each day in December, a name is pulled to win the item on the calendar, and that's a really good fundraiser. It's a lot of fun. And then the high school is also doing t-shirts, just like the middle school does. We look for the business sponsors, and we give them away for free during the basketball games. An ice bath. I didn't know what it was. It didn't sound appealing to me, but the children really want an ice bath. So basically, the athletic director is looking into it, the athletic physical trainer. So you literally fill a big bath of ice, and the kids, when they're done with cross country or baseball, they go into a big bath of ice, and it's supposed to be very therapeutic, very good. And the kids were all super excited and really want an ice bath. So we're going to look to see, the biggest cost would be to get an ice machine to produce enough ice to fill a bathtub for the kids. The bathtub itself is really cheap. It's like $70. But to make all the ice to fill a bathtub for all these kids is kind of the expensive thing. So I've never heard of an ice bath before, but I've been very well educated on an ice bath and how beneficial it is to athletes. The scoreboard was brought up again. But you're still looking into the finances of the scoreboard, and we'll see how we move forward with that. And that's it for the Booster Fund.
Thank you. Karen's not here, so I don't think we have an update for you. Know,
I was at PTSA.
Want to say something?
So PTSA, they are getting a hypnotist to come in, which I went to see a hypnotist on my honeymoon, and if it is as good as that, I cannot wait. So they're doing that fundraiser. They are doing the Krabby Owls again. They are on a pretty good roll. I didn't take notes. But pretty much the same parents that are on Booster Club are on PTSA, and I'm starting to go to PTSA because I'll have a senior next year, so I'm just starting to see how that goes. But they have quite a few fundraisers lined up and some that sound really fun.
Thank you. All right, SEPTA, you want to just give a quick update on what we've done so far?
So far, we did our paint party fundraiser in September, which was well attended. It was a very successful event, and our meetings have been posted. The dates and times of the meetings have been posted on our Facebook page, and that's about it.
Thank you. Jerry, do you have anything from Kate?
No.
I do want to say, and I don't have it with me, and I apologize, and Karen's not here, but I got something about Karen about how many years she's been a part of CAVE, and they're giving her like an achievement because she's been at CAVE for so long. So I'll have to remember to bring it. I apologize, I don't have it tonight, but maybe I'll bring it for the next time.
She's been a board member for over 10 years. They have, I guess they give you, I don't know if they give you a letter or some, they give you some type of acknowledgement that if you've been on the board for 10 years, you get an acknowledgement. If you've been on the board for 20 years, you get an acknowledgement. It comes from CAVE.
And she's also getting an award or certificate for so many credits she has too. She's over 20, I believe, and like I think we all got our updated ones. I don't know, but I know I'm at 19, but she's beyond that, so she's getting something from them too. So, but I'll have to remember to bring all that stuff. But thank you. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Just CAVE coming up? Okay. At Advance, so my report from them is I got to stay in Terryville again, which was really nice. They had an annual meeting at the partnership school, which was last Thursday morning. It was a breakfast meeting. They invited every superintendent, all central office staff, and every board member to come. So there were some people who've never been to the school. Got to tour it again, which was nice. Jeff introduced the senior staff and all the department heads. He highlighted all the accomplishments that Ed Advance has done this year, but really showcased the school, the partnership school. And let's see, where am I? Okay, so then we had a short meeting after that, and we basically went over our budget. We'll do he did our presentation. We'll vote on it next time, but we also voted on a policy, which is the student program policy manual, which they got from Kate. So it was, I did policy again. So that was fun. So we did that. It was really quick, but it was nice because there was a lot of people that, again, had not seen the building, that were from different towns, that are able to use the building and use the services there. So it was really nice and greatly attended. So, and then.
First meeting next Wednesday morning.
Thank you very much. That was for the District Safety Committee, by the way. All right, so next we have board comments. Does anybody have any board comments they would like to talk? Dick?
Since it was brought up, I'm the only one in the room here who was there the night that Terryville High School won the state championship. 1954. Wow. We drove all the way to Stores. It was at Stores. And Johnny Koskowski was one of the, there are not many of them left. It was quite the thing for us. Because we hadn't won until before that was 1936, which was before my time. Not much, but before. But no, I was there that night, and it was such an exciting thing. I wrote one of my articles about it a couple of years ago. It was at that time that the Lions Club thought it might be a good idea to have a sports night banquet for them, and we cheerleaders and everybody. And it was great. We had a big thing here at the old high school gym. The whole place was full with tables, and the kids from the school were waiting on tables and such. And it was just Bob Cousy was there and spoke. Quite a time. I still remember.
That's great. Does anybody else have any final comments? All right, well, I just have a quick final comment. This is technically our last official board meeting as this current board. The elections are coming up, so I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation on the board and all their teamwork and all their hard work over the last 2 years. So thank you. So our next meeting will be on November 13th, 7 o'clock here at Terryville High School. And I am going to move to go into executive session at 8:18 to discuss a personnel matter, a memorandum of understanding, and inviting Dr. Semmel. Do I have a motion?
So
Second.
Melissa, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll be going into Mr. Holt's conference room.